Hey everyone, my name's Chris Lambert, and today we're going to be talking Call Me If You Get Lost by Tyler, the Creator. It just came out a few hours ago. I spent an hour listening to the album, and then 2 hours in the Green Room app by Spotify in a room with Cole Kushner and Cam Ostrander, who wrote season 8 or season 7 of Dissect on Because of the Internet, talking about this album for 2 hours. So I'm kind of steeped in Call Me If You Get Lost at the moment, just in terms of production, lyricism, and wanted to give some thoughts on an initial reaction to this album. And the first thing, if you watch his channel regularly, you know that I'm very much a narrative-driven person. Our Kanye podcast, Watching the Throne, looks at the themes and narratives of Kanye's songs and albums. We have a movie analysis website called Film Colossus, where we explain movie endings. I wrote a big article for Forbes a couple years back when Igor came out, explaining the narrative of Igor that we turned into a podcast. So I'm constantly someone that's looking for narratives on these albums, really appreciating Kendrick Lamar, Tyler's past work. And as somebody that loved Igor, I was really excited for Call Me If You Get Lost, just to see if Tyler was going to continue with these narrative and concept albums and where he'd go. And the thing I was most excited about was him going big again, right? Because if you look at the track lengths or album lengths, you can see Bastards 55 minutes, Goblins 73 minutes, Wolf was 71 minutes, Cherry Bomb was 54, and then Flower Boy's down to 46, right? And Igor's all the way down to 39 minutes, so much smaller. But it was really well done, right? Great narrative on Igor, great production, but it was such a small package that you just kind of wanted him to go big again. Especially if you really like Goblin and Wolf and those earlier albums. So Call Me If You Get Lost, coming in at 52 minutes and 41 seconds, is a nice middle ground. It's not that 71, 73 minute mark that the other albums were at. So not quite as expansive, but it's definitely a step up from where he was at with Flower Boy and Igor. And I think he's kind of hitting this nice balance of knowing how to go, kind of how to mix both maximal and minimal. Because, I mean, Call Me If You Get Lost is big. It's 16 songs. But the front part of it, from Sir Baudelaire, or Baudier, I don't know how you say things in French, Baudelaire, we'll stick with that, all the way up to Manifesto, is about 22, 23 minutes. So through 9 tracks, you're just kind of flying through. And then 10 to 16, these last 7 songs, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 7 songs, make up the other 30 minutes of the album. So the bulk of the album's in the last half. But I think I have a sweet spot for this earlier portion, just production-wise, lyrically, and I'll have to listen to it more to kind of figure out why that is. But it was definitely tracks 1 through 9 that I really enjoyed much more than 10 through 16, which I love the album. I think it's fantastic, but I just had a preference for the first half rather than the second half. But the question you might be wondering, is there a narrative? Not sure. I expected, with everything we were seeing in the previews from a lot of the videos of him with the girl and the love triangle, which is like the third love triangle to take place on a Tyler album, which is like, our guy needs to get out of these love triangles. But I expected that to make up a majority of the album the same way that it did on Igor, and that you kind of follow that linearly, but it might just have a different tone. Where in Igor, he was more of the heart-wrenched fool that's waiting on this guy to come around. This time he's the bad boy and the girl is kind of lusting after him, and he has the power of things, which is kind of the case. I mean, he's much more confident and in a much better space emotionally on this album than he was on Igor. But there's not quite that same narrative, right? He talks about the love triangle on Corso. Of course, What's Your Name is all about him meeting this girl. But then for a lot of this middle portion, it's not about that at all. Tyler's kind of talking about a lot of other things, just his life, traveling, being a role model, advice he'd give people, society, religion. He's kind of just dancing amongst topics, which is really refreshing, given that Flower Boy and Igor were so self-focused and not really him reflecting on society or culture at large, to get that mix of him talking about his personal growth and experiences, but also getting into a lot more societal and cultural stuff, I thought was a great and necessary element to bring into the album. So I was glad he was doing that, especially Manifesto, right? That's really where he kind of goes in on it. But then Sweet, I Thought You Wanted to Dance really brings us back to this crush he had on this girl that ended up being a platonic thing, but you could tell the two were in love, were really interested in each other. And it was just her having a boyfriend and feeling at odds with breaking up with the boyfriend to be with Tyler and not being able to take that step. So this song, which is nearly 10 minutes, or is 10 minutes, encapsulates kind of the emotion of their relationship, but also the falling apart of what they had. But on Igor, where that was so destructive for Tyler, here he actually uses it to, what's the word? Inspire himself, or he kind of bounces back from it. So you get this heartbreak that takes place on I Thought You Wanted to Dance, and then his mom comes in and is just like kind of defending him, like showing that motherly affection and love. She's not commenting on the relationship, but you can just feel her energy in the moment and what that would mean for Tyler, that he's taken care of, that he has people that love him, and that this relationship isn't going to make or break him. And that leads directly into Rise, which leads into Blessed, which is just him kind of talking about how blessed he is, how much he has. And then Juggernaut is also kind of flexing. He's on a track. He has Little Uzi Vert, who's huge right now, and also more like younger than Tyler, right? Like Tyler came before Uzi Vert when we think of releasing albums in terms of like the lineage, right? The same way that like Kanye or Drake came before Tyler. And then Wilshire, he goes back to the relationship and really comes at it from this a thoughtful place rather than an emotional place, right? It's not the same state he was in Igor, where he's still really deep into these emotions, and not even the place he's in Wolf. It's something different where maybe because of these successes, because of where he's at in his life, he can spend 8 minutes talking about what happened with this girl and do it in a very mature, thoughtful, deconstructive way that's going to be really, I think, cathartic and illuminating for a lot of people that may have dealt with something similar, where you feel like you get friend zoned in a way, or that you have a crush on someone and they clearly like you, but for some reason you're just not moving forward. And Tyler being so vulnerable about that experience, I think, is something that so many people are going to relate to and really connect with this song. And it's going to be a fan favorite, not just on this album, but in Tyler's discography as a whole. And he follows that up then with Safari, which ends up being kind of a, not like patting yourself on the back, but kind of a victory lap in some senses. Like, so much of this album deals with travel, and Tyler talking about how empowered he was by travel and how necessary travel is. He keeps referring to his passport. Going to France comes up, going like skiing comes up. You can tell that he's starting to equate or use travel, connecting it to a sense of freedom and a sense of individuality and a sense of growth and maturity, where he had kind of talked about those things in terms of driving before. He felt like driving was an escape. Driving was a way to reflect and think through situations in life. But this is taking the driving motif and blowing it up to something much larger. It's not just driving, it's traveling the world. So Safari, ending with something like that, kind of brings you into this place of feeling like life is a safari, where you're just going out and collecting experiences, seeing what you can, and really living for the experience, which is something that he kind of encourages people to do on Manifesto and on other spots throughout the album, is trying to get people to feel inspired. So this album works on a few levels in terms of being this narrative of this almost relationship he had with the girl and the heartache that resulted in, but also the lessons that he learned from that experience, while also kind of Tyler maturing and looking back on his own career and discography and celebrity and appreciating where he's at now and coming through a lot of the, I don't want to say juvenile is not quite the right word, even though he was very juvenile. Like he talks about not hitting puberty until he was 23. But just the early stages of Tyler, caterpillar Tyler. In one song, he talks about like becoming a butterfly or going into the cocoon, right? So the difference between caterpillar Tyler and now this butterfly Tyler, who's fully formed or fully matured, him kind of easing into that perspective in a way that he hadn't done on the previous albums. I guess the previous albums were him easing into it, but now he feels fully in that space and just owns it so well that like 29-year-old, as he calls out in Safari, Tyler, or 30, he's 30 now, is just really a different kind of person and a very confident and assured person because of the successes, but because of the travel. And you're just getting a lot of this reflection of his personal journey as well as his romantic journey, as well as him just wanting to be a leader in some ways and starting to take on more of that mantle of, I can see how I can be responsible for others and encourage others and inspire others, not just through sharing my story and them connecting emotionally like they did on Igor or Flower Boy, but in actually actively encouraging you to travel, to feel free, to make your own choices and do what feels right and best to you. So there's a lot to take apart in this album. I don't quite know if there's a linear narrative, right, in the way that he did on Flower Boy and Igor. This feels larger than both of those, and the relationship might be flashback. We might be able to kind of tease out more anchor points in this and kind of say, okay, this is where this act builds to something like that. But it just seems Tyler at this point is working through a lot of stuff and kind of just going back to the relationship at certain key times. So you get Corso, What's Your Name, Sweet I Thought I Wanted to Dance, and then Wilshire being kind of the four key moments of that, with the other stuff kind of mixed in around it. And maybe this is kind of showing his maturation, where he's a little more, what you want to, like, immature at the start of everything, and how he's acting on What's Your Name, and then a bit more mature when we get to Wilshire, and he's just reflecting on everything. But production-wise, the album is just amazing. I think in terms of how it balances, people have been talking about it having a very mixtape feel, especially having DJ Drama throughout it, just kind of shouting things out and being a hype man. Like, DJ Drama just feels like a friend that's riding shotgun along for the ride. He's just in so many songs adding such personality and character. I really like how much he's featured on this album. But like the hardness, or just like the toughness, like the edge that's in songs like Corso and Lemonhead and Lumberjack is great. Like, you keep just sitting there being like, yes, what production, what attitude. But then he balances that with songs like What's Your Name and Hot Wind Blows, even though it has this amazing Lil Wayne feature on it, feels a little lighter than some of the other songs when it comes to production. Manifesto is just this like really nice epic feel, even though it's not even the longest song on the album. Rise is another one that has this nice balance between some intensity and some lightness. But then you just have these really sweet moments like Mama Talk and Blessed. Wilshire's So Confidential. There's a lot of beautiful production on Sweet I Thought You Wanted to Dance. And then Safari's another one that's kind of a mix of the lighter side. Like, it still has some of those harder elements, but I think it has a lot more in common with Sweet I Thought I Wanted to Dance and some of the like chorus elements of Rise that are very like bright. So cool album overall. My three favorite tracks are Corso, Lemonhead, and Manifesto. So that's currently my top three on the album. And I gotta say, the only songs that I'm not feeling right now, and maybe I'll learn to love them, are the two epics, which is weird because I tend to be more of a maximalist. I tend to love the epics on an album more than anything else. So you think I'd be really into Sweet I Thought You Wanted to Dance, but there's just so much repetition in those songs. Like, Sweet doesn't have much to it. So if you're more of a production person that really likes being steeped in these melodic harmonizing progression or productions, then I think you'll really enjoy that song. But for me, that really wants like something like what Corso's doing or what Lemonhead is doing, or wants a range like going back and forth, right? Like one of my favorite songs is Blood on the Leaves by the one and only Kanye West. And that song has so many moving parts. It has soft parts, it has loud parts, it has like dramatic parts. So I really like range and dynamics in a song rather than it just kind of being a loop or very slow. And Sweet and I Thought You Wanted to Dance are just so slow. And there's so much repetition between the dynamic moments, right? That I just on first listen through I got really bored during that. And then Wilshire is, as I was saying, really emotional and something that I think a lot of people are going to connect to. Just hearing Tyler tell this story as kind of that last call energy to it. It's just Tyler dealing with his breakup and like talking about the relationship rather than Kanye talking about his whole journey to getting signed to Rockefeller. Just the difference to me is that Last Call is more of a story. Like Wilshire, we already know kind of like where the relationship goes, what's going to happen. He talks a bit about what happened on other songs. So while you're getting specific details here, it just also feels like you're getting very specific details about a relationship that you're not necessarily a part of and that isn't, it doesn't have a happy ending. So you're just getting a lot of like gossip, a lot of drama. And I think that can be really emotional. For me, as somebody that's been in like a 7-year relationship at this point and married for 2 years and kind of past my days of this, I think when I was in my like college years, I would have been like all about this. But at this point, I'm so far removed from it. I'm just kind of like, yeah, that's hit my mic. That's younger drama. And like how funny that is. I'm not as interested in hearing about it at this point, but I do really like the breaks in the song. But it just doesn't quite have the production that something like Last Call has, or that story that has a lot of moving parts, right? Like Kanye's journey to Rockefeller is really an epic, where this is a lot of like monotony that's very interesting to Tyler and can be very emotional if you're really vibing and reflecting on the times that this has happened to you. But I don't know how many times I want to listen to Wilshire all the way through, where I listen to Last Call all the way through. So I think that would be one of my criticisms about the album, is just this is one of the like the cornerstone songs on it, and I feel like I might skip it more times than I listen all the way through, which I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's, for me, there are going to be people that want to listen to this nonstop and just really feel validated and connected to this song. So I think it's important. I think it's good. Like you have to take chances like that, and it might not appeal to someone like me at this point in my life, but it's definitely going to appeal to a lot of people. So those are my like only 2 criticisms on this. And then it's a little killer because those being my like least favorite songs and then making up like 16 minutes of the album, and then also having these like 2 skits back to back that don't necessarily, like they're fun and enjoyable, but I don't know how many times you want to listen to those all the way through too. So once you get to this part of the album, it's just like, I don't want to listen through this all the way. I don't want to listen through this all the way. I want to listen to Rise, Juggernaut, and Safari. So that's why the start of the album's a little stronger to me overall, but I'm excited to keep listening to it, and I might come back to you a week from now and be like, I was so wrong, start to finish, amazing, what was I thinking? But you know, you're getting the raw first reactions right here, right now. So that's it. I would love to hear what you're thinking about the album. What songs stood out to you? Are you happy with it? Are you disappointed with it? I know a lot of people are really excited because it does feel like a combination of Tyler's discography, that he's really hearkening back to old Tyler in a lot of ways while bringing in elements of new Tyler and just kind of resolving his discography up to this point. I know people ahead of time were comparing it hopefully, like to Kanye's The Life of Pablo, which also felt like a resolution of his discography up to that point with a lot of callbacks and a lot of mixing of styles from both old and new Kanye. So, excuse me, this feels like Tyler's Life of Pablo in terms of just talking about the life of Tyler, the creator, who I was, how I got to where I am, where I'm at now, and being really excited about his future. So I think this is the thing that I want from albums, right? This feels so personal, but also has just bangers throughout that are very emotional. Like it could be a banger like Corso that's just like so fueled, or it could be a banger like Wilshire that's just so emotional, but not to be too. I know comparisons, people are like, why did you have to do that? But I think about the J. Cole album, right? The Off Season, and it was really good, like great production, great rapping, great like clever lines, thoughtful lines at times, but it feels almost, I don't think performative is probably too harsh of a word or like too critical of a word, but it almost feels like J. Cole's putting on a show on that album, like a stage performance, like a Broadway show that's really good, but is it like true, like the most true thing to J. Cole, letting us into his personal life, his growth, his fears, his demons? I don't quite get that impression, which not every album has to be that, right? Like Future delivers these amazing albums with just being Future, where Kanye does get way more vulnerable, Kanye and Kendrick, right? Where you have Drake, who's kind of faux vulnerable. Like he talks about these relationship woes that he's having, but you're like, I don't know if you're actually having those or if this is just you making a hit song. I feel like I know J. Cole in past albums has really let us in, right? There's a reason why people love Forest Hill Drives as much as they do, why they love Born Sinner as much as they do, KOD. But in comparing Call Me If You Get Lost to the Off Season, just as those are, I think, right now the prime competitors for best rap album in 2021, this is what appeals to me more because I feel like Tyler is taking more risks. He's being more vulnerable. He's being more raw in a lot of ways. And it just feels more dynamic and fresh to me than what Cole did on the Off Season, even though Off Season was incredibly impressive in a lot of ways. It just feels maybe a little more hollow in comparison to something like this that's just so emotional and has a lot of layers. Like there's a lot to take out from calling himself Sir Baudelaire, right? And just knowing that Baudelaire is one of the most famous French poets and what that then entails as he's maybe positioning himself as this like poet and essayist and critic at this point in his life, and connecting more so to a French figure than anyone in America. And what does that mean for just how Tyler's viewing himself? There's this characterization that comes up front that then colors the rest of the album that I just don't think you're getting on Cole's project, which doesn't mean that it's not great music, it's not enjoyable. It's just when we're talking about like really loving nuance and layers and deeper aspects to a work of art, that's what Tyler's giving us. And, you know, I think he hit a home run with this project, and it's going to be something that people are listening to and talking about for years to come, and just really solidifying Tyler as one of the artists we have to talk about as being the best of this 2010s generation, right? Like, I think for the most part, people talk about like Kendrick, of course, Kendrick, Drake, J. Cole, Travis Scott, as like the two pure 2010s artists, right? Kid Cudi as another one. The Weeknd doesn't quite count. Future as another one. But I don't think we talk about Tyler enough in terms of like what his discography is, how deep it goes. This is his 6th studio album, if you're not counting Bastard. And I think it's like going toe for toe with any of the Drake projects, with any of like anyone that's not Kendrick, right? But he's the closest to Kendrick, I think, of anybody else from that generation. So I don't know. I think we need to talk about that more. So put some respect on Tyler's name, you know? And if I crack anything in terms of the narrative coming up, I'll make another video on this. If there's enough specific questions about some of the stuff, maybe I'll make another video on it. But let me know what you're thinking regarding this album, favorite songs, where it ranks in Tyler's discography. I'm still trying to think. I think I like it more than Igor just because of the scope and scale is so much bigger than Igor. But I'm going to have to listen to Igor again and just compare. Okay. That's it. Until next time, stay wavy using our Kanye lingo and keep it loopy, you know? Cheers.